Welcome to the Koffeine Cafe, where we don't serve coffee, we serve puppet cults. I'm Lisa.
And I'm Z.
And welcome to the Welcome Home Debrief, Episode 2. Welcome to the Koffeine Cafe, where we don't serve coffee, we serve puppet cults. I'm Lisa.
And I'm Z.
And welcome to the Welcome Home Debrief, Episode 2, where we're gonna cover everything we missed from the Declassified last episode, especially that huge update and the Halloween update.
Yeah, this has been quite late. I guess you can count this as a nightmare before Christmas, I guess.
Given how even the Since the last Declassified episode of Welcome Home, we've seen yet another big update from Clown on the website, and that was the Halloween update. And on the surface, it does seem like it's just an addition of funky little costumes and some merchandise, but Clown of course delivers, and there's just so much more under the surface. Before covering those updates, I think it'd be a good idea to go deeper into what we missed in the Declassified episode, given that it was a pretty hefty guy. We've got audio recordings, cryptic messages, strange clips of what looks like POV shots from creepy Crawleys. So, the first thing we're going to be looking at are the Doodles. And we're familiar with those from the prologue, but if we take a look-see into the individual audios and the title of each page, they form a little dialogue. Just to be transparent, I'm not entirely sure that this arrangement is how it's supposed to go, and I'm going off of my own theory and other members in the community's speculations, but a lot of credit goes to the Neighborhood Watch on Tumblr. First of all, we see that the audios start off fairly calm. He addresses the viewer/listener directly, so we know he's trying to talk to us. In terms of the actual audio, we get, "There you are. Welcome home. Ha ha ha. What are you waiting for? To hear me again? Ha ha ha. I think that means you can hear me. Can you see me? That's okay if you can't. Don't worry. I know you're there. You know I'm here too. I will talk to you." Alright, okay, he knows we're here, and he feels assured that we can hear him. That's no problem at all, right? But with the next part of the audios, the switch seems flipped. "I can't hear you. Do you know who I am? We've looked into each other's eyes so many times. You're looking at me now." There's a little desperation, sure, but it's almost as if he sees us trying to respond somehow, or maybe he's assuming we are trying to. Whichever way it is, he wants to have some sort of acknowledgement that we are aware of him, or maybe he wants to know what we want to say. It gets even more desperate later on when he says, "Why won't you answer me, neighbor? Why can't I hear you? You know me. You do. Please open. Let me in. Let me in." While it could be read as Wally begging to be seen and heard, there's an audio distortion of some sort that kind of makes me think that this isn't Wally, it's the other Wally. And if we check out the text that we see in the title of the tab, it would spell out, "I will help you find a way soon." But that just opens even more questions. Does this mean that this is a supplementary answer to have us let him in? He says, "I'll help you find a way soon" to where? To what? To do what?
I'm very curious as to what he means by "I'll help you find a way." Because is it a way to get to him or to let him in?
Right.
Or to get you out?
Right. Is it the sort of thing where it's he comes into our world, we go into his world?
And who's speaking? Because this is a little harder to justify, because during the live streams I've mentioned that it could be either Wally or Evil Wally, going back to the idea of the Evil Wally theory, and
yeah,
I don't know. Because there is evidence to suggest that it's actually good Wally or even bad Wally, but it's hard to differentiate who is who here because we don't really know a basis. And this is just working on the theory that the dual Wally theory is true to begin with, and it's not. It's just a theory, so it doubles down on that idea of what does he mean.
I getcha. That's interesting that you bring it up because I do have my own thoughts and theories about this audio in regards to that, but that will be later.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, because on one hand, if you have the good Wally, then yeah, it's probably the way out. But if you have evil Wally, it's the way in.
Oh, that's how you see it. I like that. I like that.
Yeah. It's interesting because depending on the context, it changes everything.
Now we get to the big part of that previous update, the creepy Crawleys videos. I just brushed over them in the last video because there were a lot and I wanted to dedicate more time to them. as the individual snippets have a lot of details about the neighborhood, the characters in them, and we sort of get a peek into their daily lives, or at least what I assume to be their daily lives. And that opens the door to a lot of questions, and that, is this a peek into their lives on or off camera? And if it is this a full episode we can see? And if it's not, does this mean they're actually alive? We're gonna go through them one by one, matching them in an almost chronological order, or at least finding the stories that sort of line up alongside each other, as it does appear that all these events happen either in a span of a day or two. We have that fly on the wall on the What's Welcome Home page that shows a conversation between Frank and Barnaby, and they're talking particularly about Frank's flowers. We don't see them talking, and we don't really see any of the puppets at all throughout all of these videos, so we'll just be calling it the camera view. And so this camera view appears to show us this garden, or a patch of soil in the garden. There's an orange peel, presumably from an eaten orange, some clothespins, some other fruits, and judging by how things went in the audio, Wally was helping Frank tend to his garden before getting interrupted by Barnaby's little shenanigans. And a thing that stands out from their conversation is, as Frank and Barnaby are arguing about humors and flower puns, a single line stands out. Frank says, "I doubt you're any sort of bugle. I've never seen a blue dog in my life." Fascinating. We're usually allowed to believe that blue dogs are just about normal, given how common they are in children's media. And there's a suspension of disbelief, not to mention there's like sentient caterpillars and birds everywhere, but not for Frank. It's a bit of an anomaly for him, for some reason. Moving on to the merchandise page, a butterfly by the records leads us to a camera view of soil, again, with what looks like squash, tomatoes, and the same clothespins. But here we hear a conversation between Frank and Julie, discussing beetles and bugs in Frank's garden, specifically on how to keep them from attacking his poor old produce and flowers. We get a hint of Julie understanding flowers, but also a hint that Frank understands bugs. I don't know if he means that in the way that he understands that they speak a language, so to speak, or that, he gets the bugs or anything. But anyway, Julie suggests that they head off to Howdy's shop to see if he has anything to offer to help him out. Following that, we have the stickers page with a spider that leads us to a conversation between Julie and Barnaby this time. The camera view doesn't show soil, but it does show sunlight peering through the leaves, as if Wally is laying down on some grass and looking up. And the two argue about humors in the same way that Frank and Barnaby did, with Julie defending Frank's and her own humor. Nothing else really stands out aside from the cheesy jokes, but there is a little note at the end of this video where Barnaby sits, I think, next to Wally. He says, "Bury me in my favorite sunny spot." Like, I don't know. Am I reading too deep into this? I hear something vaguely relating to death and I'm running with it with barely any direction. But I put these three conversations together because it does seem like it happens around roughly the same time as each other, or at least they heavily reference each other. It's hard to say which came first, at least personally. It's likely that Wally was already there when Frank and Julie were having that conversation, and that Barnaby came in a little later after Julie had left. Then we have the neighborhood page with a beetle, and this leads into a rather wholesome conversation with Poppy and Frank. They appear to be baking something. The camera shows us a game of tic-tac-toe and a set of plates, and as the conversation goes on, we even get to see the muffins that they're making. As the two discuss the dangers of kitchen appliances and the aesthetic of pastries and whatnot, there are two things that stand out in their conversation. One, Frank mentions, "You eat with your eyes first," making Poppy a little hesitant to serve her goods because maybe they don't look pretty enough, and Frank resents his statement. But it's interesting because he mentions eyes first. You eat with your eyes first? Is he not aware that Wally eats with his eyes only? He just chomps with his corneas? Does anybody know? It seems like no one does. Two, as Poppy hesitates and worries over Frank handling all these dangerous hot appliances, Frank comforts her by saying, "Oh no, it's fine, Besides, we're all safe and sound here." Why would you say that? Why would he say that? He could have said something like, "Oh no, it's fine. I know how to handle these appliances and tools. They're very safe to use." Or, "It's alright, I can handle this." But no, we're safe here? From what? What are they safe from in their own homes? Am I reading too much into this? If we head on over to the Playfellow exhibition and find the bug there, the camera shows us what I think is the same table from Frank and Poppy's conversation, but now it shows an apple, some tea, and pastries. And instead of Frank, we have Sally. And Sally here is asking dear old Poppy to make a cake for a show. She says that it's this whole dangerously amazing cake with several tiers, and that she's the only one who can handle a feat of that caliber. And then we would have the mantis at the bottom of the About Us page that leads to a conversation, this time with Sally and Julie. The camera shows us a script of a small play that Sally has made, with Julie being the star of the show. The play seems innocent enough, a fair maiden becoming a queen and proclaiming a new law or something. We can make out some of the text at the very bottom, something about freeing the false something or another, but that's not very clear. But I do think it's very important. Once we listen in on the conversation, however, it appears that Julie is completely gone off script, which irritates Sally. There's a whole back and forth over having to stick with the script or just being creative and allow for more fun because the queen sounds like such a fun gal. But because of that, we'll never actually know what that script really says. There's also another bit in this audio that stands out to me, and it's the fact that Home plays an important character in the show, and that is a knight. And Sally says something like, and here's where Home will exit stage right, that is if they show up for rehearsal, like, it can walk? The transcript doesn't even include that part where Home plays the knight, it goes directly to then the maiden fair. But no, the house can walk. I mean, the home can walk? That's even more crazy to me than anything so far, but I did put all of these stories together because they do seem a little more connected, in that the events happening in Poppy's house have to do with making some stuff for a play that Sally is holding, and I feel like that play is rather important. I'm not sure whether it was Sally who went there first to ask Poppy to make the cake, and then Poppy freaked out and thought like, maybe I'm gonna need some help, and then invited Frank over, and Frank was there to help out as well and comfort her along this process, while Sally goes back to the play and asks Julie to like rehearse properly. So there's that. There is another conversation that happens in Poppy's house that I think is like super connected to that play. And this video leads us to a camera view of lace, yarn, fabrics, and even Wally's hands, which is the only puppet related thing we actually get to see. And we have a conversation between Howdy and Poppy this time. Poppy is knitting warm clothes for everyone to prepare for the winter when Howdy comes in delivering more yarn. He sees that she is rather distressed and offers this yarn spinner thing to help her fix up some string before he says, oh, I have to leave because he's got a shipment waiting to come into the shop that he needs to sign for. I'm not sure where this particular event fits in because it takes place in Poppy's house, but it does feel like it's well after the pastry making. Then we have the news page, which leads us to Howdy's shop. And this is really cute because it's a caterpillar on a leaf, so that's nice. Anyway, what do we see? Ice cream and a loopy straw. I think that's what they're called. And just as a note, aside from the small conversation we hear between Howdy and Barnaby, we hear the door chime twice. And I'd like to note this because Howdy doesn't make any move to greet them. I don't know if he's supposed to, but neither one of them make any move to say hello or goodbye to the person, so we don't know who stepped in or out, and it's a mystery that may or may not be connected to anything. Anyway, Howdy is telling Barnaby all about his family drama and whatnot, and Barnaby's keeping track. But here's what stands out to me. We get to hear about Barnaby's mom, and Howdy even says next time she comes, he'd like to have her try out his stuff. So she does come around. She visits the neighborhood of Home, and I'm gonna say visit because Barnaby is notably from somewhere else and moved into Home. So there are people from outside the neighborhood who come into the neighborhood and then leave the neighborhood. Following that, we're moving to the rhino beetle found in the guest book, where we have a conversation between Eddie and Howdy after Eddie somehow runs into a wall. The shop wall, I think, and he says, oh, pardon me, ma'am, as he runs into it. We don't see exactly how that happens, because our camera just shows us random goods in Howdy's shop. So now Eddie's chatting it up with Howdy, and oh, it's such a busy day, and there's so many deliveries, and he's feeling like he's falling behind, but that's alright, he's got this. It seems that Howdy isn't mighty interested in the conversation. All he has to do is sign for this shipment that he was waiting for and give Eddie his delivery to Julie, which are unfortunately several bowling balls. When we move into the guest book itself, on page 4, a bug will link us to a conversation between Howdy and Sally this time. Sally's looking for some food, and Howdy suggests some instant mashed potatoes called Bubble Blast Soap Flakes. But that's not all. As she's doing her little grocery shopping, he says what they are. I don't know if she's aware of it or if it's the suspension of disbelief that bouncy yellow bread is just a large sponge, and that sunshine cereal is actually just wood chips and sawdust, and that a pint of milk is just a pint of milk, apparently. Maybe it's just the funny little things he calls them, right? But but there's also that heavy chance that he's feeding these people non-food items as food and they just take it and it's okay because they're puppets. But seeing that a lot of these conversations take place in Howdy's shop, these could have taken place in the same day as well, including the portion where Howdy visits Poppy because of the fact that he says, oh yeah, I just came here to deliver this thing and now I'm gonna head on back and grab that shipment. If we check out the first page of the guest book, the bug would lead us to a drawing of a pie, drawn by Wally, I think, with one slice missing, and the letters Reen, I think that be referring to either green or breen. But anyway, it's a conversation between Eddie and Julie this time, and it covers this little game that Julie likes to play, where she pretends to have this huge business that's kind of gone under, and she starts freaking out all over the place. I do think this might have happened as Eddie was delivering her the bowling balls, but we never really see them, but that's not the full important thing that I'm focusing on. It's when the phone rings. When Eddie answers the phone, while Julie loses her shit in the background, Barnaby is the one on the line, and he asks if Wally's there. And Eddie responds that yes, he is indeed there. So I'm assuming that this particular event could have happened like prior to Barnaby meeting with Frank and Julie. Who knows? It could have been the first thing that happens, and that's why Barnaby goes out to bother Frank and Julie, specifically because Frank and Julie's houses are so close together. Either that or it's happened the next day. I'm not quite sure why. Then we find a beetle in the neighborhood page. Specifically, an Eddie's page, where we see a conversation between Frank and Eddie, where Eddie is asking Frank for some help because there are some bugs causing a ruckus with his paper chains. It looks like Eddie's frightened by them, but Frank thinks they're alright. It's clear that he trusts them, and he knows a lot about these bugs. It's even pointed out that Wally isn't really scared of them either. I can't pinpoint anything that stands out in their conversation specifically, but I think it's really the fact that it emphasizes Frank's connection with the bugs. And then we have a butterfly next to Eddie's name, again, in the transcripts page, where we hear Eddie running, falling, dripping, the works, and making his way to Wally. At least, I think it's Wally. He isn't really talking to anyone else, and there's no other person in the conversation at the start. So the delivery that Eddie is making is specifically for Wally. Despite that sort of conversation happening, the camera doesn't turn. We don't see Eddie. And Eddie even says, "What are you looking around me for?" So Wally is looking in the general direction of Eddie, but that's not the perspective we see. Well, anyway, it seems that Wally, quote unquote, has spotted Barnaby, and when Eddie turns around, Barnaby tries to give chase. But we don't see either of them. We don't even see the events happening. Are these really Wally's eyes? What is he even looking at? I think that this and the following thing is sort of the thing that happens at the end of the day, because we found this much later on as I was doing research, wherein that old code of WOXYVE, the one that leads to the whole script thing, is now a realistic looking beetle/roach. I think it's a roach. That also leads to a video. It was a surprise to find, and all we get is a view of paint, red and white. We hear Barnaby talking to Home, telling him all about his adventures during the day in such a "nah man, you would not believe the day I was having." And Home seems to be responding to these stories with the shutting and opening of doors, the windows, and creaking everywhere. I don't know whether this takes place in Home or Barnaby's just sitting outside the door of Home and he just listens to everything. And everything that Barnaby mentions involve all the things that we've been listening to in the past videos, at least aside from the ones where Barnaby was not involved. So we can assume that a lot of these events either happen in the same day or over the span of like a day or two. But that's not all. This is actually the first time we hear someone notice that Wally isn't acting alright. The other videos seem to cut off the second we hear Wally, but here Barnaby calls him kid, so it doesn't cut off, and there's a pause. There's some shaking from the camera as if it's Barnaby trying to shake Wally awake. He asks, "Hey, are you alright? You stopped painting." So he was painting something. He was in the middle of making something, but what was it? We don't see. We just see the splotches on a palette, I'm assuming. Before I let you get into this, I apologize for how much that was.
No,
how are you?
That was a lot. I don't know. I have so many thoughts right now. We already have pre-written theories here. Like we have some that's already scripted that we want to talk about, but that left more more stuff. Given that, okay, I watched these videos alongside Lisa, right?
During the stream, yeah.
During the stream, and like during the process, like while you were like stitching everything. Again, Lisa does most of the research here because I cannot read.
Spectacular.
But I help her out with like trying to make sense of everything she finds. This is a lot. This is a lot more. Like, this is the first time I'm also seeing everything explained through Lisa.
Yeah, I think one of the things that kind of help it is the fact that I arranged them in a particular way, not in a correct way.
Not
by
in
all
the correct
means.
way. I can better see what the correct way is, and it's kind of a shame that you didn't do that personally. But I can see why it wasn't.
Yeah,
because it's huge.
It's huge. I personally feel like however you're gonna arrange it will be different from mine, obviously.
Yeah,
however, I made sure to avoid how other people might have arranged it because I wanted to see how I'd interpret it. So I'm curious how you would.
How I would is like I don't have any specific ones right now off the top of my head, but it seems like it's an entire episode.
Just one, right? Right.
Just one episode. Because really think about Sesame Street. Really think about Blue's Clues, or like, their narratives tend to be very non-linear.
Yeah, right?
There's A plots, there's B plots, there's C plots.
Sometimes
and that's normal for TV shows, but specifically with kids shows, they tend not to be too focused because they're not too serious. The story's not too serious. It changes every episode, and every story beat within the actual episodes themselves can change. And there's still some coherency if you rearrange them and all that. The only one that doesn't seem to fit is the realistic bug.
Right?
But I'll get to that later. So it seems like it's an entire episode with like every character having their own plot. Sally is making her own show. Howdy's trying to like fix up his shop, all that, and there's a weird focus on Frank and Eddie, but separately. And here's the thing: as you mentioned, Frank seems to have a weird connection with bugs.
Yeah,
he can hear bugs, but who are we looking through when we interact with the bugs? We're looking through Wally.
Yep.
So this leads into the Frank theory later on that we'll discuss. So
the Frank one?
Yeah, but I'm not gonna spoil anything. However, Eddie, like really watching it more now, it seems like Eddie is also more involved because he seems to be more interactive with everyone. And I don't just mean the Welcome Home residents, I mean everyone, because implications of people outside of Welcome Home, like Barnaby's mom, all that. Like, where does the mail come from? And he is known to like get mail from outside of the little town, right? Yeah. So I'm wondering, is there more to Eddie than meets the eye?
I think that with every Declassified, specifically the Welcome Home ones, will be doing more. We'll be having an additional theory per character.
Yeah.
Like,
I like that actually.
Yeah.
Adding more mystery to each character. That's personally what I would consider good writing in terms of like an ensemble cast. But yeah, that was quite a lot. And before we move on, I do have to mention another thing. Home can walk? Like, home, as in like the big guy himself can walk?
Yep.
Wow. Like, that adds so much to like, mystery and all that. I will elaborate on this like in the Halloween update, but wow.
Yeah.
Home can walk. That's terrifying. But I guess one last thing, because like again, this is a lot. I'm remembering a lot more stuff. Home can walk, and the fact that like we're not going back to Wally specifically. How are we seeing just specific shots if it was supposed to be Wally's eyes, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of contradictions, and I admit that in my own theories, but it's fascinating.
It's very fascinating. I mean, not as fascinating as Home walking, but
that's just my thought. That's just my thoughts on it.
Yeah, but again, I will elaborate on the dual Wally theory later, but it seems almost as if Wally's experiencing an out-of-body experience.
And now we can take a look into that incredible Halloween update. While it isn't as big as the really big one, there's still a lot to unpack. For one, we can start with the different characters in their cute Halloween costumes sprinkled all over the website. We have Julie dressed as a witch, Frank as a vampire, Howdy as a ghost, Poppy as a pumpkin, Sally as a Pedrolino, Eddie as Frankenstein's monster, Barnaby as a werebeagle, and Wally as a little devil. Surface level, yeah, they're cute, but given what we know, there's probably some deeper meaning to their design choices. Maybe, probably. I'm standing by it. When we move into the news site, which of course holds all the information of what's new all over the site, there's something a little different about this particular update. It starts off just as optimistic as the other previous updates, but then it quickly devolves into frustration, and the writer seems to be irritated by this lack of materials being sent in. But this doesn't really go on for too long, as it simply continues in the usual happy-ish tone, as if nothing happened. But then, around the end, it starts to get strange again, with mentions of coughing, headaches, nausea, this strange sense of something clawing at the screen. Should we be concerned by that? Well, apparently not. Also, as a side note, according to the Welcome Home archive document, this bit actually ends with "don't forget to wave down below," rather than all the other previous sign-offs with "don't forget to wave up high." Then we head over to the merchandise site. We've got the Welcome Home official cookbook from an unknown manufacturer, which features actual recipes that you can try out for yourself. They look like those simple recipes you can make with, a proper adult guardian, which makes sense because it's a kid show. What's interesting, however, is that it wasn't a book that was sent in, but just a few pages. Given that these pages are in better condition than expected, at least that's what's implied with it being comprehensible and all. There's also the official Wally Darling Halloween costume, also from an unknown manufacturer. And aside from the fact that we know it's made of polyester, there's not much else known about it. It's in surprisingly great condition, but it also didn't come in its original packaging, so we don't have any details on its origins or whether there are other costumes for other characters. And it's pretty cute in its own way. It's actually incredible in its design, but it does look a little horrifying. And saving the best for last in terms of updates is the Happy Haunting to Boo and Yours, endorsed by Crispy Speeds and published by Marlowe. This one's a doozy because it's a near 20-minute long audio recording of a fun little Halloween party hosted by Sally Starling. I won't be playing the entire audio, and if you want to check it out, I highly recommend you do. But to summarize a few interesting points. 1. This was a party hosted by Sally Starling where she invites everyone at home to tell spooky stories, to experience the true horror of Halloween. She calls it the macabre menagerie of monstrous mischief. However, to her dismay, none of them really call it that. The first people we meet are Sally and Poppy, as well as the narrator. Wally and Barnaby come in first, Julie and Frank come in next, and Eddie and Howdy come in last. There are a few interesting tidbits in their introductions alone. It seems that Sally and Barnaby are fully aware of the narrator's existence. Note that the narrator is not played by any character in the neighborhood. She seems to be a random person. Everyone in the neighborhood seems to assume that Sally is dressed up as a clown, or at least even a sad clown, to her dismay as well. But she's very insistent that she is Pedrolino from the Commedia dell'arte. What's interesting here is that the only person who knows and immediately recognizes it is Eddie, who said he did some reading on the Commedia dell'arte. But before he could further discuss that with Sally, she just cuts him short and decides to start the party anyway. And so the rest of the party seems to be fine, at least to everyone else. They tell their own little spooky stories that aren't very spooky at all, depending on your perspective. So Sally decides to take over and tell her own scary story. And this is what's interesting because there's a portion of the entire audio that's distorted, and that's given as a warning in the description of the audio itself. And it's also said in the transcript that there is a distortion in the audio and that the person running the site is asking if you guys can understand what's going on. Ooh, let us know what you think it is. Then we get this. Sally begins to tell a story on why they stay indoors at night.
It is looking for neighbors who have stayed out past the daytime to gobble them up whole. That is why so few live here. It moves through the streets at night, but it doesn't break into homes. However, on rare instances, it will find itself with an appetite left unsatisfied by its aimless wandering. Even the occasional unfortunate insect that has crossed its path is not enough. Those who have lived through the night say it isn't quiet about it either. They always say you can hear when it gets closer to you. Do you know what sound it makes? I hear it every night. You can hear it too, if you listen. Especially if you wait next to your window. First, there's rustling in the bushes. Then, the scratching on the pavement, on the walls as it crawls up. Finally, if you're quiet, you can hear its guttural sound.
I have drinks ready.
audio sort of reverts back into the party, so to speak, and everyone says like, oh my god, that was an amazing story, and it's like nothing ever happened. The party just goes on as normal. And we think we're done here, but we're actually not, because we have a bug video to go alongside with it. There's this little cute spider in the middle of the transcript of the story, with some fun little details. The video itself takes us to the exact party from the storybook, with all the conversations and wrestling and plates in the background. The one thing that stands out the most from this entire video is that we get to see Wally eating the apple with his eyes. And then we get another fun thing where Barnaby sees the apple and he says, oh, you must be guarding it for me and whatnot, but you're not doing a very good job. I mean, look at those bite marks. Bite marks? He took a bite and there are teeth marks, and the teeth marks have bangs?
That was quite the update. I'm not gonna lie. I did not expect the Halloween update at all. And for real, it was one of the reasons why it actually took us longer to make this video.
We couldn't just make the debrief and then like brush over the fact that, oh, we'll just make the Halloween update in another video. This is big, not as big, but still big.
And it's connected to what we were going to talk about in debrief anyway. Like, it has a new bug video that reveals a lot. Lisa was just like talking about how she didn't know how to justify eyes eating food. Now we get to see eyes eating food. And the weird thing about that is Wally doesn't have teeth. Neither in the original design nor in the devil alternate for Halloween. No fangs, no anything, but Barnaby specifically says, what was it again?
Something about bite marks.
Bite marks.
The fact that there were fang bite marks.
Fang bite marks specifically. And that we see those bite marks. You'd assume they'd be like clean cut because like Wally blinked, but no, those were bite marks, you know?
Right, they were uneven like teeth. They had shape to them like teeth.
Yeah, and like that implies Wally eats with his eyes, not just in like, you know, haha funny cartoon way, but legitimately bites, which adds to a lot of questions. If you look at the fruit and the vegetables in one of the videos from the original ones, it was assumed that it was bugs, but there are no bugs in the video themselves, though the fruit and vegetables look like they've been bitten. And who just happens to be looking at them at that exact moment?
Okay, admittedly, I think I went really ham on all of the research, and I'm glad I got to show you, because that completely went over my head.
Right? Like, I only realized it while watching the videos earlier, but this cements it. Not to mention, like, okay, how would Frank not notice that Wally is eating the fruits and veg in the garden? It could be that he's not even looking at the fruit and veg. He's looking at Frank. But the camera is still pointed towards the fruit and veg, which adds to the idea that this is an out-of-body experience.
Actually, that's interesting you mentioned that, because I personally thought that it was the other way around. I'll be covering this more when I get to my theory.
Sure.
But I'd like you to know that even my theory has its own contradictions.
Oh yeah, sure.
The Halloween update really shook things up from when we initially made the debrief.
That's another thing. Like sidetracking to another thing I wanted to talk about. We had an initial theory that the creature roaming around at night was home.
That's still what I got.
It adds to the especially with the fact that maybe home can walk.
Yeah,
it's freaky still. Like home can walk, but to what extent? Because I forget that Sally specifically says that the creature claws at the walls. What does that mean? Does that mean that home has arms, has tendrils scratching at the houses around the vicinity? Or are they talking about home's walls themselves, like scratching at home's own walls, you know? But if not home, who is it? What is it? Is it the big black sludge underneath home? Is it like something from the outside, like Julie's brothers and sisters? Or is it something that's completely different? Also, I forgot to mention this in the earlier segment, but it could be related to this as well. You mentioned that Poppy is afraid of appliances, and this is part of her character, right? And Frank specifically says what about it?
Oh, he tries to reassure her by saying, "We're safe here."
Here, right?
Yeah.
As if implying that something is waiting for them outside. Now, put two and two together, is there some sort of technological aspect to this? Like, there's the monster technology. Because, like, a lot of technology has been advancing around the point where Welcome Home should have been made. Like, radio to TV. Like, I guess the internet could have been in its early stages, but I think it's a little too early for that. Yeah. But what if it's also technology? Specifically, the wording choice of "we're safe here" and the fact that there's a creature outside trying to like break in. Those are the two things that stand out to me the most in terms of a connection here. So I'm not sure if that's just me being all paranoid or like scared of technology in general, but again, that's something to think on.
Now that we've gotten all of that settled, we can't ignore the revelations and theories coming from you guys in the comment section. So here are a few that we picked up in our last Declassified. For one, while we didn't get any confirmation or denial on any of our theories for obvious reasons, what we did get confirmation of is that we don't know anything, which is somehow even more exciting because that allows me to dive even deeper into pure unadulterated insanity. But I digress. It looks like we can't just assume that one or two characters will be playing a big role, as it seems that every character has an important role, and that is very evident with each and every update. We have a couple of comments regarding Frank's role in particular. There's this comment that shares a few observation and theories on Frank's presence, and that he may not be as present in the same way that Wally is. So there's that theory that Wally is sharing all these memories involuntarily, and that there's a sort of association of them with Frank. And I quote, "These are Wally's most important memories, and for whatever reason, he believes Frank would want to know what he knows in those moments, allowing those memories to leak in the form of bugs." Frank may be seeing or even sharing this other perspective with the bugs. It's emphasized even more with this comment on how Frank could be a spy that's trying to stop Home and Wally, or the evil thing controlling them. I mean, we have mentioned that Frank may be trying to communicate with us somehow in one way or another. The bugs could be that, given that sometimes they appear to be hidden away or hidden in plain sight or even actively hiding from the user at times. We also have this comment, Frank is the only one without a known origin, and that perhaps that is a very important thing to consider as well. I'd also like to thank you for acknowledging the distortions in Wally's voice, because after listening to it for hours for this video, it's nice to know I did not hallucinate that. We also have this comment that points out that Barnaby is able to understand Home, and what we assume is the same way as Wally is able to. This whole update also shows that Home is just as part of the neighborhood as a neighbor like the rest of them. He was gonna play a knight in Sally's show with, I'm assuming, speaking lines. There are also these two comments that stand out to me as things that I have also missed. It's pointed out that the phone has two missing buttons, one white and one black. Home is implied to be the white one, so who's the black one? I mean, even if Home was implied to be the black one, who is the white one still? We also have this comment about Eddie this time. There is that thought that he probably has memory troubles because he might have found something he shouldn't have sooner than everyone else, whatever that thing may be. It's possible that he had his memory warped a little. There's evidence to suggest that he does know more than he lets on, but not in a I'm suspicious way, and more of a this seems familiar and I don't know why kind of way. There was a lot of love for Frank in the comment section here.
There was a lot of love for Frank.
Yeah, so what are your thoughts?
Okay, so one of the things is a lot of people picked up that Frank has a lot to do with it, which is why I have theories on Frank's relationship on it, but I wouldn't say that it was involuntary. Like, my theory is that Frank noticed that the bugs were getting memories, right?
Ooh.
Now, the question is, were they involuntarily placed into the bugs, or was Wally inserting his memories into the bugs to call for help? Like, think about it this way. Why would Wally be eating Frank's vegetables, like, say, you know? But if you take into mind that, like, maybe Wally, quote-unquote, is still looking at Frank while the bugs, quote-unquote, were eating the fruit, it could be his way of trying to, like, call for help, you know?
But I I imagine is that you just said, Wally needs help. Wally chomp. Wally eat bug.
No. Wally
Yeah.
chomp gets ignored. Wally look at bug. Wally upload memory into bug. Frank sees bug. Talk bug. Oh my god, Wally. And then shit goes on. Frank like, hey, you looking at website. Bug.
That is actually weirdly the most coherent theory here. I finished editing the theories to this yesterday, and that is the most coherent theory that is going to be on this video. I'm warning you.
No, but seriously, like, it sounds like that, and that was the entire Frank theory, actually. That essentially, Frank ignored Wally unintentionally at the start, but now that shit's gone down, he's sending you everything that he knows for you to possibly help them or something.
Yeah,
you know?
I get it.
But yeah, anyways, speaking of theories, here is what we have.
This took ages to finish, and since we're halfway through this mammoth, why not check out our merchandise? We've got shirts, we've got stickers, and we've got hoodies. Why not also try checking out our memberships, where you can get some perks like early access to videos, members-exclusive emotes, and behind-the-scenes looks into our own ongoing unfiction series. Anyway, back to the video. Now, because of all these updates, we do have some new theories and additions to old theories following the big updates. One of which involves another singular character, Sally. But rather than be something akin to Frank's situation, it's possible that she might have been the one who started the entire thing, somehow. Said thing being the existence of something evil lurking in Welcome Home. The basic idea here is that Sally must have done something. She might have orchestrated some sort of ritual, but something went wrong. It's very clear that she is aware that something is happening in Welcome Home, at least from the Halloween video. Evidence number 1. It's clear that Sally has a lot of involvement in the productions of Welcome Home. And by productions, I mean in story. She's the one who organizes larger events and plays within each episode. If we were to take the idea that the puppets are sentient, it's possible that she is a major playing point in the organization of the actual production of Welcome Home itself. So we know that she has influence, and that influence has to do with being able to tell all of the characters what to do. She has control. However, that brings us to evidence number 2, the Commedia dell'arte. The Commedia dell'arte is a form of professional theater, dating all the way back to the 16th, 18th century. It's mostly known for its improvised dialogue and cast of stock characters. However, what's interesting here is that Sally not only is very adamant that she is dressed up as a character from the Commedia dell'arte, but the fact that she plays Pedrolino, a sort of sad clown character trope, if you will. The Pedrolino is a sort of comic servant character, but if she were to be someone who orchestrates and organizes events, parties, and programs within Welcome Home, why is this her character? Well, it's evident in the story itself, where she does introduce herself as the Pedrolino. No one actually listens to her. No one really cares what she has to say, leading us into evidence number 3, which still takes note of the Halloween update, specifically with the storybook reading. It's clear that no one takes the party seriously, sure, but once she reaches her story, her scary story, the audio cuts. But when she speaks again, the audio becomes clearer. She talks about a creature that haunts the neighborhood of home, and how it's out there every night looking for something, searching for something to consume. That's scary enough in and of itself, but it's important to note that she says she hears it. It almost feels like whatever is out there seems to be taunting her, at least from her perspective. Long story short, Sally herself is a director and orchestrator of events, but to her, she feels like she is a sad clown who tries her best to entertain, but when no one listens to her, when she tries to do her best to do one thing, something goes wrong, and now whatever it is that went wrong then now haunts her night after night. Before we get into discussing those theories, I'd just like to point out that the costumes that we see in the one Halloween art, the official one, some of the costumes are different from the ones in this Halloween episode / update. So yeah, food for thought.
Food for thought, and chomp them up with your eyes and your main brain mind, because that's what I did.
Excellent.
So, that opens up a lot of like speculation in my brain. Like, I'm not gonna say this is like full theory mode. Like, we have that theory that Sally was involved in something.
Yes.
In terms of summoning something, because she's very particular about getting this event down.
Or even getting events in general, but she seems really picky about this one.
Yeah, kind of like almost like our reasoning was it was almost kind of like a cult ritual.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
But really taking into mind that like there were discrepancies in the costumes, which could honestly be a mistake or intentional. Who really knows? Like making our own project in regards to unfiction. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to consider, and it's easy to like forget details. So check it out here. Anyways, could it imply that this isn't the first time it's happened? Because what is the one thing we tend to do with TV shows?
Aside from watch them, rewatch them again when they're on reruns?
Exactly, rewatch them. We keep rewatching them and rewatching them and rewatching them. And we've talked about the idea that these puppets are probably in purgatory. What is purgatory to a TV show character?
Oh, just reliving the
reruns, right? Like
reruns.
They're practically stuck in a state of doing things over and over and over. And what's the definition of insanity?
Repetition of the thing.
And expecting different results, right?
Correct.
Now, here's the thing. If it's in a time loop, like this is what's specifically happening, could be that Sally is more aware of it.
Yeah,
and
right?
That's why, and Eddie specifically, because those are the two characters who changed their costumes from what is essentially a scarecrow from Eddie turning into Frankenstein's monster, and the lion from Wizard of Oz now turning into Petrolino.
Yeah, it's also interesting. The Commedia dell'arte, right?
Yeah, from the Commedia dell'arte. But here's the thing. It starts off with the Wizard of Oz characters. The lion for courage and the scarecrow for bravery.
Yeah.
And now it's Frankenstein's monster, the misunderstood creature trying to look for meaning in life. And Petrolino, the sad clown of the Commedia dell'arte. Is that just coincidence? Was that just a mistake? But the symbolism is there. Courage to essentially loss of hope, and brains in terms of the scarecrow to essentially looking for meaning in life because of that sentience.
Also, just as a side note, it is interesting because those are the two characters who we know are aware and know what the Commedia dell'arte is.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing. It's interesting.
The second theory is more of an addition to the dual Wally theory, once again acting as a sort of confirmation of it. It focuses specifically on how the Wally that's communicating with us specifically is other Wally, while the regular Wally from Welcome Home, the real one perhaps, is finding some other means of keeping himself present in Welcome Home. Evidence number 1. The bugs showcased on the site, the ones that lead us to Wally's perspective, are cute, colorful, and cartoonish. These bugs are showing us Wally's memories, what he can recall from those days. They're innocent, normal, part of his daily life. But there's one bug that stands out, and that's the weirdly realistic roach on the script page. That's different, and that could mean that the perspective that we do see is less of a memory and more of an out-of-body experience. Something like other Wally taking over his body while all regular Wally can do is watch kind of scenario. Evidence number 2. The audio that we hear from the Doodles versus the audio that we hear from Wally in the media and merchandise have a slightly different vibe to them. And yes, our theories now work on vibes. For one, the Wally that we hear in the merchandise and media sound pretty normal. It's warm and friendly. There's a silly little aloofness to him, if that's even a word. But the audio we hear from the Doodles, even the text that we get from it, seems a little more confrontational. There's something else in that voice that is less silly and more sinister. Number 3. This is less of evidence and more of a thought. But working with this aspect of duality with this theory, what if for every silly little cartoon bug creature, we have a realistic one? Something that will still show us something from Wally's perspective, but once again, rather than a memory, something that may increasingly show us other Wally's influence. I have a feeling that the next major update may involve more realistic bugs hidden away in some pages. Some places like the staff-only page. And who knows, maybe eventually we'll find a realistic roach roaming the main site itself. something that'll overpower regular Wally.
So I already alluded to the idea that these bugs are Wally trying to ask for help.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that maybe Frank's the one sending it to us. Because Frank is the one who has been shown to send letters with drawings of bugs on them.
Yeah.
And they look very similar to the bugs that we see on the websites sends the realistic bug.
Yeah.
But it is kind of questionable whether or not the dual Wally theory is still in play, considering that there's just so many things that we still don't know. These are still speculations, and I'm not sure to what extent there are two Wallys.
I getcha. I know we ran with the dual Wally theory, like, from the very start, but that's still, regardless, it's still just a theory.
Yeah, and like the idea of Home possessing Wally, it's still there, but I'm not sure, because despite the fact that, like, you know, Home can walk, there's still no evidence that Home can manipulate people, you know? And that's the thing that I'm curious about, because the only confirmation that we've had so far is that something is up with Wally. Everybody actually acknowledges it, because Barnaby did in the realistic bug video, but nothing else. And that actually makes me curious.
Yeah, it shakes things up a bit.
Yeah. Side note, so scratching the walls, like from the story in the Halloween update, given that maybe it was Home, right? This is just a fun little haha theory. What if, because like we don't have any confirmation as to where everybody goes, right? It's just assumed that they go home, like to their own individual houses,
yeah,
right?
They mentioned that. Like, you know, they say
So,
they
like,
go home.
Okay, scenario. What if it's Home, right?
Yeah.
Like Home's roaming around with home legs, like
home
like
legs,
home
yeah.
legs roaming around, giant chicken legs, like the Baba Yaga, like roaming around, eating all the bugs and all the creatures around that's still outside the house. And then you just have like a feral Wally running around, scratching the windows, and it's like,
Open the door.
open the door.
Spectacular.
No, I don't think that's it.
The third theory is sort of an addition to the last episode theory, and that's looking into the monster of Welcome Home. Our last episode theory was mostly about something bad and big happening during the filming of an episode, leading it to becoming the last episode of Welcome Home. But with the addition of this monster of Welcome Home, quote-unquote, we can speculate that said bad thing was a monster, the one that we were just introduced to in the Halloween update. Now, who could this fearsome beast be? Well, it's possible that it could be, or at least be directly related to, Home. Evidence number 1. Let's look into the Halloween update, specifically with the storybook. Sally tells us of a creature that roams the neighborhood, something that comes from outside Home, and something that consumes anything and everything. So, 1, we know that it's something that does not come from the neighborhood itself, so it's unfamiliar. If we go with the idea that the monster is related to Home, that wouldn't make sense, right? Because Home is at the center. But remember, there is something that does lie beneath Home, something that we aren't even sure is from Home. Evidence number 2. This one starts off a little silly, and it comes from the Sally and Julie bug video, where it's briefly mentioned that Home takes part in a play as a pretty important figure, I assume, a knight. Why is this important and silly? Well, it only works if we go with my initial thought that Home is able to, like, up and walk. It's noted that Home has to exit after a particular act or line, so he's supposed to move somehow. I don't know. That sounds like something that could be monstrous. And if he can walk, then it can roam, then it can stalk at night. Evidence number 3. Going back to that last episode theory, we were working under the assumption that the episode involved Eddie lifting Home up after being dared or challenged by Sally, Julie, and eventually everybody else as well. What if, at this point, the thing that lurks beneath Home wasn't only released, but it had already embedded itself into Home, kind of merging with it. And when Eddie tries to hoist it up with all his might, it triggers something in it, and it lashes out.
There's a lot of stuff that we've already mentioned prior, but
Yep.
it's still shocking that yes, like Home has legs, and this is the third time I'm gonna mention it now, but still, the creature that lurks below Home. you mentioned may have fused with home. That is not something to be discussed before. That's your own original theory, huh?
Yep, that's just my own personal unhinged thought. Because I considered that how long would that creature have been in there? Because it kind of seems out of pocket if the creature just suddenly exploded out of underneath home because of a botched ritual caused by Sally. I feel like it was a long time coming, and if it was a long time coming, and if it's something that haunts Sally night after night, then I think maybe as it lingered there, it started seeping out, not just seeping out of home, but seeping into its cracks, maybe into Wally. Maybe that's the whole other Wally business we've been like encountering, but instead of it being Wally, it's like home. So yeah, that's my thought.
So you're implying that home isn't the creature, rather home is also a victim of whatever this is.
It's quite possible, yeah.
I like that theory, honestly, because it adds to that idea that these guys are just being puppeteered. Like, it adds another dimension. Like, is there a triple Wally theory, you know? But I digress, because that's getting a little off the wall at this point. But I like that idea. I like that idea that there is something else at play here, whether it was summoned by Sally, whether it's like created by technology at the time, whether it was like brought in by really desperate executives, producers, directors, blah blah blah, who just wanted an edge on the show because another show was trying to beat it. Like, it adds to that idea that these puppets, they're just victims, and that includes the titular home.
And so that was kind of the huge updates and the updates on the updates and the updates on our theories.
You said updates so much, my brain's starting to hurt.
Correct. So is mine. But because we like to torture ourselves, what are your theories on the updates?
Do you have any thoughts of your own? And if so, we might feature and discuss them in the next episode.
Yeah, given that we also got a smaller one last time, count on us if you want to check out another full deep dive into Welcome Home.
And do not worry, this series is not just a Welcome Home series. We are scripting a bunch of other unfiction, ARG, etc. stories. We're just really, really invested in Welcome Home right now. But this isn't just a Welcome Home thing. So look forward to other series in mind.
And if you have any specific ARGs or unfiction you'd like us to cover, put them in the comments below too. We'll check them out. If you want a recap on what's been going on in the friendly neighborhood of Welcome Home, you can check that out right over here. And as usual, we'd like to thank our members, Purge Flyfox, Butter, Shifter, and Daryl Jones. We always appreciate the support. Till next time.